You know it's me, and you know it's me, and you know what I'm here to do, and you know what I'm about. So let's get into it. Here I am. Here I am. I'm just tweeting out that I'm live. What's good, y'all? It's me. Let me get a loop going for y'all, cause what's up, Kuma? This is gonna be a long stream. It's gonna be a heavy stream. Gonna be a deep stream. We're gonna go into a deep dive in the Department of Justice's findings from their 2016 investigation into the Baltimore Police Department after the 2015 killing of Freddie Gray, who was killed while in police custody. Before we get that going, let me show you the drip really quick. I don't match. I got all kind of colors on, so I look kind of crazy right now. But this shirt is vintage from the year 2003. So you already know what time I'm on. This shirt is older than a lot of streamers on here talking shit about me, but we'll see. We'll see how this plays out. That's what's so, you know what I'm saying? That's what's like, some of these streamers coming at me, especially on political takes, right? No names. Dylan Burns. It's like, my nigga, I got t-shirts older than you. Before we get into that, you can't fit your shits from 2003? Well, see, here's the thing. It's because I was a mall goth in 2003. I was a gerbang. So I bought everything in size 10. It just happened to work out that I was like fucking like 5'8", $170, buying L's and XLs, having no clue that 20 years from then that I would actually fit into a large or extra large. I got fat too, but I actually grew into the big ass clothes I bought for myself when I was in gerbang mall goth time. It's crazy because this shirt specifically was an actual fucking tent on me. I remember like the sleeves, not even like the sleeves came past my elbow and shit. It's so wild. There's that Destruction baseball tee that I had that I wore last week or the week before that is from the year 2006. Or I'm sorry, it's from 2007. I got it from the first band that I played with Destruction at Sonar in 2007. Cool dudes. We played with Municipal Waste too. I keep forgetting that Municipal Waste and Into Eternity and Eternal Ruin play that show. We played with all those bands, and I bought one of those baseball shirts because I really liked baseball shirts, but the only size they had was large, so I had to get it in large. So like, there's pictures of me in prom, like at prom, in the prom after party, in this fucking huge baseball tee with like the like with it coming past like my forearms and shit. It looked ridiculous, and now it fucking fits me like a glove. It fits perfectly. Making you Google shit? That's funny. Before we get too deep into what we got going on, let me open up Twitch for my mod view because not all of you guys' comments are coming through my shit. Looks like Polly People is reviewing the conversation between Big Papa Fascist and Merrick. Good Lord, that my nose is about to start bleeding just from being aware that that is happening right now. It's just, I don't know. Anyway, shout out to Poly People. I fuck with Poly People. If that was ambiguous. I actually do like Poly People. What up, Big Richie Lizzie? Let's get shout outs for the people in chat. Shout out to Fett. Shout out to Kuma, of course. Famo. Shout out to DC Metal Chris, as always. Shout out to Big Richie Lizzie. Shout out Globus. Shout out Fett. You rocking with me just like I'm rocking with y'all. I'll say that I'm happy that my view count and my chat is the same after all those bots got clapped on Twitch today, because I know a lot of other streamers can't say the same. No names. Dylan, Stardust, Stanzel. Hang on, I'm trying to figure out. There we go. Whoops. How the fuck do I go to mod view? Where are my... There we go. All right. All facts, no printer. You never watched the channel, but you're a fan of poly people as a concept? Yeah, I guess that'd be more accurate to say. Conceptually, I'm a fan of poly people. I just wish that the whole fucking debate fucking champ shit, that... I wish more people understood that the debate champ shit was like last decade even, like streamer. That the direction that Twitch and streaming and all this shit as a whole is moving in is educational. It's more educational. All the fucking there's a ceiling for that shit, right? Once you do segregation, you can't segregate no harder than that. Right? We've been doing toxic people of all permutations, toxic white men, toxic trans people, toxic black people, right? We've been doing that on the internet, on this medium specifically, but not just here on YouTube and all these other platforms for a decade at this point. Like I say constantly, my introduction to this shit was not Destiny, Vosh, or even Hassan. My introduction was The Skeptical Heretic all the way back in 2011, right? And the format was way cooler then because how it worked was you would come out with a video, someone would make a video response to that video. If there are any points of contention to that response, you would make your own response. And then eventually, maybe if the dedication and the time and the stars aligned, you might get some shitty, grainy, fucking like stick-am debate between the two people with some moderator who's going to be a shitty moderator, not say anything and just let people fucking scream and shit the whole time, right? There was that, and I feel like what happened between then and now is like what happened with like brutal death metal and slam death metal, where motherfuckers listen to Legion of Inferacity by Suffocation and like internal suffering and shit, and they were like, wow, the breakdown is the best part of the song, so why don't we just make the whole song the breakdown? And it was fucking terrible. That's what Twitch debate is, right? They were like, let's ignore the whole like 2-3 videos worth of build up that leads up to the debate with all the facts and everything laid out. Let's just go straight into the debates of people fucking screaming at each other and talking about how they dunked on each other and not educating anyone or getting any points across. Just posturing and fucking building the cult of personality, right? That's a metaphor. I mean, it's accurate as fuck. It's accurate. They took the worst part of the political online shits on YouTube and then made that their entire fucking platform. They could never pull off a pierced from within. Ever. But before I get too deep into that, let me get some petty shit off really quick that I know y'all want. It's been on my mind and I want to throw it out there. But thanks, Wither King. Fuck Dylan Burns. Dylan Burns is not a trustworthy character. He should not be trusted for any reason, for anything. The only reason he's reaching out to Keffels to apologize and smooth things over is because she has a massive audience that kind of dwarfs his, and he's incentivized to do that. He's made no attempts to reach out to me, despite what he did to me with my platform being far more fucking egregious, because there's no reason to. He's already constructed the narrative surrounding that. I'm a snake, whatever. He wants me to fail, probably mad because I talk to people that he used to talk to or whatever, and he's just a petty fucking slime bag. The first time we ever encountered each other, he was raiding me with 500 people so that he could watch me go back and forth with Sansol. Did that entire fucking manifesto about Hippy Dippy where he sucked Denibo's dick for like 3 fucking paragraphs and didn't mention Mr. Geek a single time in that entire manifesto, even though Mr. Geek was the original host of Hippy Dippy Recruitment, was the moderator of all the panels that I was on. The recruitment literally lived on his fucking YouTube channel. He edited all of the videos and VODs, but he's chopped liver when it comes to who he thanks and credits with the success of Hippy Dippy, right? It's because Dylan is a fucking snake. He views people and marginalized communities and so on and so forth as stepping stones for him to achieve his own personal goals. And I couldn't tell you what those are, whether it's just like internet fame or like the bag from streaming or whatever. I couldn't tell you. But the dude literally fucking abdicated his political responsibilities here in Maryland as part of Michaela Wilkes' campaign to drop 20 bands to fly overseas to do war tourism for a fucking documentary that we have not seen and probably won't see because it's probably trash. It probably doesn't even exist. Yo, what up, No True Leftist? What up, Frackle? What up, Sean? Needs more mullen chops? Yeah, he wants Keffel's audience, even though I doubt that anyone from Keffel's audience would enjoy Dylan Burns content for longer than even a few weeks, and I feel like that's being pretty generous because I lost interest with his shit fairly quickly. That's why I didn't know what Hippy Dippy was before I went on there because I was like, cool, I'll just fucking whatever. I'm doing cool. We're talking some shit before we get into the meat of what I really, really want to talk about. Talking about how people like Stardust and Sansol and Rhizome and them are fucking viewbotting, and that's why their viewership got clapped today because they're so pathetic that they can't even get viewers using other people's content. They got to buy them. And Dylan is to thank for all these people. That's the shout out to Nine Tails because that was the corniest. I mean, it was one of the only parts of the conversation with Nine Tails of his that I watched, in fairness. But it's him talking about how all the people he's platformed, about how there's like no real conservatives that he's platformed that got famous off of him, blah, 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 blah. And lots of leftists, quote unquote, got famous off his platform when he's just talking about rad libs, right? People who don't have the same type of politics that I do. It's just people who have BuzzFeed politics, and they're nice, so they're personable. We're smoking on Hippy Dippy Pack. We're smoking on more of this Hippy Dippy. We're smoking on CTV still. And this is preemptive Stardust, because I know Stardust is going to get banned, so we're smoking on her too. And we already know what time it is with Sansol. It's only a matter of time for him too, so we're smoking on that Sansol as well, because these people are fucking pathetic. It's just, I would be so fucking ashamed of myself. I would be so embarrassed if my content consisted exclusively of shit that had nothing to fucking do with me, and was just me commenting on shit that was completely fucking immaterial to anyone's experience. Like this fucking Nicholas De Rio fucking idiot talking about how drama streamers and such are more valuable than leftist streamers. And, you know, this is why I get mad at y'all for not gatekeeping enough shit, right? Because y'all let people like fucking Dylan Burns call themselves leftists, right? Fucking stupid. And it's just, I'm trying to imagine being so terminally online that I have no clue about mutual aid when it comes on to food not bombs or jail solidarity or, you know, door knocking, any type of shit that actually involves touching grass. I'm literally just sitting at my fucking computer and I see that Lauren Southern has like 50,000 viewers or whatever, and fucking Keffels has 75,000, and that means that, you know, whatever fucking stupid destiny shit that these people believe in their heads. You're glad you haven't heard of half of these people? I wish I hadn't heard of half of these people either. I got sucked into this shit because I fucked up and went on a Hippy Dippy recruitment before I realized what it was, and didn't realize how fucking trash all these people were till months later, and eventually earned myself with a hot mic vid. Even though I did an entire month's worth of Black History Month content with Catarana, shout out to Catarana, because they put me on and gave me opportunities that all these other streamers could not fathom, right? Shout out to Catarana, always. We did an entire fucking month's worth of Black History Month content that culminated in the conversation with Vosh, with the mighty Vaush, right? Dylan completely fucking ignored all of that to give me a 500-man raid to watch me go back and forth with Sansol. What up, Heavy T? What up, Nightwolf? Catarana is good people. And now I'm in the shit because I talked shit about Dylan and forgot to fucking end my live, and his feelings were hurt, and he went full Karen mode. And now I get fucking, I'll be trying to do a video about fucking police brutality, like a video like tonight, for example, and then wake up to fucking snake emojis and people telling me about how Dylan owned me and shit in the comment section. These are not serious people, and they should not be taken seriously. Bunch of rad libs, fucking war tourists, people calling themselves sock dems. When you should, the more appropriate term would just be Bernie bro. Because the reality is, if we got Medicare for all, a lot of these so-called leftists on this platform would disappear overnight. They would vanish in a thin fucking air, like Cinderella's fucking shoe, right? If we got legalized, all these ANCAPs and leftists and sock dems and blah, 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 we wouldn't hear a fucking thing from them, right? They would go right back to doing anti-SJW content, which a lot of people like Hunter Avlone and these fucking types already do. And on that note, I'm going to talk briefly about, very, very briefly, about the conservatives, the reformed conservatives, because there is no such thing. There's people who decided that they wanted to cash in on the political animus of the years 2016 and 2020, had realized by 2020 that it was no longer profitable, fashionable, or really just like acceptable socially to be pro-Trump or be conservative, all things considered. So they decided, I'm not going to functionally change anything about what I say or believe. I'm just going to point at people further right than me and talk shit to and about them, right? That was the strat. So a person like Hunter Avlone can shit on a big papa fascist, but then turn right around and talk about how Kenyan nations, nomadic Kenyan tribes, are primitive because some fucking Italian travel agent wrote that about them, and that means that it's a neutral source, right? It's people who have not critically challenged any of the things that they structurally believe about minorities, whether we're talking about black people, trans people, et cetera, et cetera. It's just that they've moved from a position of hating them to a position of patriarchy, right? Of policing them. No, right? I, as a white, straight, cis man, know better and will advocate for you better than you can yourself, because you will get emotional, right? Whatever. The Vosh take. How many takes have you seen of people saying that I'm a bad advocate for black liberation? We would be rich. We would spend all day counting, right? But these people will say that and without a single ounce of irony turn around and call themselves leftists. That they genuinely, passionately care for marginalized people, want to protect them, et cetera, et cetera. Tagma with the raid. Big Cakema in this bitch. Shout out to Cakema. So anyone who refers to themselves as a reformed leftist that is not outright staunchly anti-capitalist or anti-white supremacy is sus. You should not be taking that person seriously, especially if they do stuff like people like Sansol, for example, where the same weekend that Keffels raised 200 bands for trans advocacy, Sansol was going back and forth on Twitter and in his chat with people about how neopronouns and xenogenders aren't real. Because the cis white guy would know better than anyone else about the gender permutations of the entire fucking country. over time, no less. So, yeah, there I don't take any of these quote unquote reform conservatives seriously. They're spitting the same goofy fucking anti SJW rhetoric that was part of the alt-right pipeline on YouTube back in the 20 fucking tens. They're saying all the same shit. They're just saying it in a sense of the energy is the same, right? The energy is the same, trying to take these people down a peg. This uppity black person, this uppity trans person, etc., these neo-pronoun, fucking xenogendered Zoomers need to be taken down a peg and taught a lesson. But not because I view them as intrinsically inferior as a consequence of my own superiority, right? That sentiment is still there, but not because I want to kill or get rid of these people. It's because I know better than them. And they're children that need to be educated and coddled and fenced in and protected. How do I sit in a room with the door open like that? Do I live alone? No, I don't live alone, number one. Number two, I'm not a pussy. I'm not a fucking coward. I'm literally looking at a screen of that entire wall behind me. If anyone comes in that door, I will immediately know. And they will also immediately know that I know. Be careful with words. Yeah, I know. I got banned because someone called me the F slur and I didn't act performatively outraged about it enough for Twitch TOS standards. But anxiety, fucking fam, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. Fucking close the window or something. I don't know. It's hot in here. It's fucking hot. And I'm not going to sit here and boil and drip sweat because you can't look at a cracked door behind me. Sorry. Trigger warning, I guess. So, without further ado, I'm going to throw some tunes on and we're going to take a look at this investigation that the DOJ did into the Baltimore Police Department. It's long. Content warning, especially for some sexual assault, racism, obviously, prejudice, etc., etc. It's going to be a rough one. When the door is open. Yeah, that's literally why the door is open, is because the AC is in my room, and the AC has to come from my room all the way down the hall into this room. And if the door is closed, I'm going to cook in here. I got an AC. It's just in my room. I had to make a fucking executive decision. Do I want the AC in the room where I spend 2 hours a day? Or do I want the AC in the room where I spend 8 to 12 hours a day? Do I want the AC in the room where I do exactly zero fucking? Or do I want the AC in the room where there's a non-zero chance of me doing some fucking? Just saying. When the infrastructure is built to resist winters, but the season is summer, yeah, Maryland is ass. Complete and total fucking ass. Let's get these tunes going. You have an AC in every room. There's a non-zero chance of you fucking, and that's a lot of rooms. I feel it. The non-zero option, yeah. Clearly. Alright, so now that you guys understand that I have the AC in my room because I don't want to fucking have sweat running off my chin like a fountain while I'm getting my cheeks clapped. Hang on. Let's talk about these Baltimore piggies. Also, shout out to everyone in chat. Shout out to Talorx, of course, Big Lorx in the chat, Mix Matty B, Nightwolf, No True Leftist, OG Prodigy, naturally, Wither King, of course, Captain Jackass, I see you, Globus, naturally, Jason Society, I see you, my boy, JJ, Nightwolf, of course, Frackle, Big Richie Lizzie, Fat Kuma, the mods, respect them, because they will fucking ban you. Heavy T, last but not least, Alex Goddard, what's goody? I like to. I'm black. I'm from Baltimore. I'm gonna shout people out. It's going to happen. I'm gonna do it a lot. DC Metal Chris. I don't know if I said you. Everybody though. So, without further ado, let's get into some shit. I know I've said that a million times, but we're actually. Oh my fucking god, dude. I fucking hate Streamlabs OBS so much, dude. Ace, what up on YouTube? I see you. Shout out Baltimore and Maryland. Yes, sir, ski. The East Coast is still boiling, yes. The high today, I think, was like almost like 100 degrees. I don't even know. It's getting, because we're getting up to the dog days of summer. Not quite, though, but we're getting close to wet bulb conditions. Wet bulb meaning it doesn't matter how much water you drink. If you go outside, you will die. You will overheat. You will die of heat exhaustion. Original OBS is better, but I haven't figured out how to get all the chats in one place on OBS yet. I can only get one chat at a time, and I multi-stream, so it doesn't work for me. I gotta have YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook all in one spot. Let me just move that up there. I don't know why I want that there, but let me just, let's get that. Yeah, let's put that there. I don't know why. It just feels nice there. Matter of fact, let's go ahead. Whoops. Let's just move the whole joint down. I'm saying, let's get that there. There we go. Ignore my shitty fucking layout. I'm working on it, but so the DOJ findings. This came out in 2016. For a little bit of backstory on this, you guys can hear me okay over the music, right? Is the music a good volume to my voice? I really hope that's fireworks, not gunshots. It's kind of late for fireworks, but we'll see. If you guys hear sirens in the next 10 to 15 minutes, you'll know what happened. Hear me just fine? Bet. Plug in for multi-chat and OBS. That makes sense. Hottest part of the year is August for us. I'm lucky I've been spared for the most part this month. Yeah, hottest part of the year is August for us as well. Dog days of summer. It'll get wet bulb conditions around then. I was born August 25th, so like I'm a summer baby and I'm used to like super hot conditions outside. You know what I mean? Like outside, I'm Gucci with that, but I can't, like I literally just like can't even sleep if the room is too hot. Turn the music down a little bit because it was getting to me. I could hear it in my ears much louder than you guys could. All right, so Chatterino to reach Trit and pop out player from OBS for YouTube. Okay, I'll figure something out over the weekend. I'm just to let you guys in because you guys are here and I fuck with you guys. You guys are cool and you guys fuck with me, so you guys should probably know. There's two things I'm doing. Number one is I'm going to redo the whole layout for Twitch. Well, the stream, obviously, everything you see in the video is going to change. I'm going to do whole new layouts and stuff for the video. But the layout on Twitch is going to change. I'm going to do a whole new graphic design for that, all that stuff. Also, I've been toying with the idea of streaming in the AM Eastern Standard Time. Starting streaming at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time and going until like 11 Eastern Standard Time until I got to leave for my day job. Thinking about actually making that partner push and trying to make dope content and make money off of the content that I make. So this is just an idea I'm toying with. It won't be for a while. If I do, that'll definitely be after August. You'll be fast asleep for that stream, LMAO? Yeah, I feel that. I honestly have no real reason to do partner push. Like, I'm a 20 viewer Andy, even though I fuck with you all super heavy. I absolutely love you guys. You're loyal as shit, but I don't think you guys would constitute enough for me to be like reasonably a Twitch partner. We'll see though. You'll be up and ready. Let's go. All right. This is the investigation of the Baltimore City Police Department by the U.S. Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. This report was released on August 10th of 2016. What precipitated this report was the killing in police custody of Freddie Gray. For those of you who don't know who Freddie Gray is, I did a video about him on YouTube. You can search under my channel. It's about Freddie Gray. He was killed in police custody. There's a lot of really disgusting details about the nature of his death that I won't get into here. Suffice it to say, the most important part was that the police fucking killed him. And we had lots of unrest here in the city of Baltimore. I'm hesitant to call it a riot because of the connotation of the word riot, especially considering that all the things that we would call a riot were all instigated by the police. Surprise, surprise. But there was a lot of unrest in the city of Baltimore in the days following the announcement of the killing of Freddie Gray, which precipitated two things. This investigation here, and also a consent decree on the Baltimore Police Department, which meant nothing, as the Steve Angelini case that I talked about on Monday would demonstrate for us. What up, Roxy? So, and that's kind of, that case specifically as a segue was why I even thought to bring this up and talk about this with you guys. Not just because it gels with the general vibe of my channel, you know, anti-cop. I'm a police abolitionist, if that's ambiguous, if anyone here is wondering about that about me. I am a police abolitionist. I do believe that the police should be abolished. I do not view the police as a legitimate institution. I think they are a weapon and a tool of colonialism and white supremacy, among all of the other social ills. We're talking about transphobia, misogyny, patriarchy, etc., etc. The police are bullshit. All cops are bastards. All of them. Right? Like Michael Brooks said, be nice to people, be ruthless to institutions. Right? When I say all cops are bastards, I'm sure when your fucking uncle or cousin or whoever is not in uniform, when they're at your family gatherings and shit, drinking a beer, probably an amazing person. However, when they put that uniform and that badge on, they are upholding the system of white supremacy, colonialism, and settler violence against women, trans people, children, etc., etc. That is the organization that they are supporting and operating inside of. Right? So that's me. Anti-police. We should use all of the money because, as I said Monday, the officer Steve Angelini, who was the officer that was arrested by the FBI for selling ghost guns, cocaine, and information on homicides to biker gangs, the infamous riders. That officer, Steve Angelini, was making $87,000 a year, just base pay in his salary of taxpayer money. So that's not even that's before we even get to the issues that the Baltimore Police Department has with overtime and stealing overtime from the taxpayer, which is a problem. It's the worst kept secret in the department, right? Before we get to all of the benefits and discounts and shit that you get as a state employee and a police officer, right? Roxy, you're a cop? Nah, you're banned. That's what you are. You're not a cop. You're banned. It's like I was going to ban you and then unban you, but I don't know how to do it from the screen. I don't even want to do it as a joke. Anyway. Yes, that is the video, Globus. That's the video I did. Thank you for posting that. Globus the Elder just dropped the video that I did on Freddie Gray in chat. So, now that you understand that backstory behind this, where this report came from, and a little bit of the nature of the Baltimore Police Department itself in terms of its corruption and its overstepping of boundaries and callous disregard for the people who pay their salaries that they're supposed to be protecting, let's get into the findings of this report. We'll read this. We'll start off with the executive summary here, and I might not read all and everything out of this because it's long. It's 164 pages. I'll skim it because I read really fucking fast, and I've also read this before, so I'll give you guys the relevant parts, the most egregious parts rather, and as stated at the top, trigger warning for sexual assault, racial prejudice, all of that stuff. All of the worst possible things that you could imagine police doing to people, they did and documented. So be aware of that before you continue with this stream. So here's the executive summary. Today we announced the outcome of the Department of Justice's investigation of the Baltimore City Police Department. After engaging in a thorough investigation initiated at the request of the City of Baltimore and BPD, the Department of Justice concludes that there is reasonable cause to believe that BPD engages in a pattern or practice of conduct that violates the Constitution or federal law. So, trigger warning, police terrorism? Yes, basically. So, essentially, the other thing that you need to understand about this report is that this is not a report written by an abolitionist. This is a report literally written by the Department of Justice, right? It's the feds writing this, right? So the feds are the ones admitting that this shit is this egregious. So with that understanding, you should also know that the problem is probably so much fucking worse than it actually is, stated in here, right? And also, there's going to be propaganda in this where they push that the solution is not going to be to abolish the institution of the police in the first place, but like somehow more federal regulation or like more funds to the police department, something, blah, 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 blah. The standard liberal line when it comes to police and the role that they play in society. Arun, what's up, Arun? The solution is more cops, more cop programs. Exactly. The solution is always somehow more cops or more money for the cops that already exist, that are the bad cops that we're talking about, that will somehow turn good if we just give them a couple more $10,000. Tip of the iceberg sort of thing? Yes, exactly, Fraggle. Before I also, hold on. I gotta grab a drink because I'm already getting, my mouth is already dry. So let me grab some cherry limeade. I'll be back in literally like 30 seconds. Don't go anywhere. I will be right back. Hang on. Alright, I'm back. Oh, you fuckers, you left. Who left? I see less people in here than when I left. You left. You did leave. Why'd you leave? Oh, let me close the door a little bit more. Alright, so what up, Weather King? Alright, here we go. So here we go. BPD engages in the pattern or practice of: number 1, making unconstitutional stops, searches, and arrests. Number 2, using enforcement strategies that produce severe and unjustified disparities in the rates of stops, searches, and arrests of African Americans. Number 3, using excessive force. And number 4, retaliating against people engaging in constitutionally protected expression. This pattern or practice is driven by systemic deficiencies in BPD's policies, training, supervision, and accountability structures that fail to equip officers with the tools they need to police effectively and within the bounds of the federal law. So what they're saying there is that this pattern or practice is because they don't have enough training, enough supervision, good enough policies, or accountability structures. Right? They're not saying that this happens because this is what the police are set up to do. They're saying that this happens because the police don't police themselves enough, which begs the question, who polices the police, right? If you set up more policies, give the police officers more training, right? But the supervision and accountability structures that you set up are those same exact people doing the same goofy shit to these people 1, 2, 3, and 4 before. What have you effectively done aside from give them more taxpayer money to do the same shit that they were already doing? And here's propaganda. Police officers risk their lives, blah, 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 blah. Talking about specific parts of Baltimore where they acknowledge the problems rooted in poverty and racial segregation, including deficient education, employment, and housing opportunities. But nothing is ever done about that, except to put more fucking cops on the beat. Throughout our investigation, we received the full cooperation and assistance of BPD in the city of Baltimore. We interviewed current and former city leaders, including current BPD Commissioner Kevin Davis, and former commissioners. So Kevin Davis hasn't been the commissioner for a little while. I want to say he resigned in 2018 or 2019. I'm not entirely sure. Let me double check on that for you guys. Oh my fucking god. I'm sorry, I just found this. I don't know why I didn't see this before. So he was ousted in 2019, but they just let him be Fairfax County's police chief in Virginia. $215,000 fucking dollars, dog. So this Mayor Catherine Pugh, so this, for context, oh my fucking god, I hate Baltimore so much some fucking times, dog. You don't understand how much I hate Baltimore sometimes. So for context, the mayor who had to resign in shame because she stole fucking money from sick children with her children's book that she took money from Johns Hopkins or whatever for and never actually gave them books for, the Healthy Holly mayor, that mayor She fired this dude in 2019, and now he's just Fairfax County's police chief. But he's the one that they consulted for this investigation because this took place in the year 2016. Cops can always just hop to another state to continue their abuses. There's an officer Freetag who got caught in Virginia falsifying reports after he'd already been kicked out of another police department in another state for doing that. But that's another thing I don't want to get into right now. I've covered it before, but we can look at it again at another point. At some point, I have to do check out the fucked up shit police do stream. I guess this qualifies as that, and there's so much of it that it couldn't possibly be in a single stream. But aside from just this here, this being close to home and something I've read before and I'm familiar with, I want to be on the abstract of the institution of the department, do a stream of like individual police officers, right? So Steve Angelini, Sergeant Wayne Jenkins, Caesar Goodson, right? These police officers who has some fucked up things attached to their names and represent the departments that they did that shit under. So they reviewed thousands of pages of documents, went on ride-alongs, met with City Lodge number 3 of the Fraternal Order of Police, which I guess represents all BPD officers that are sworn in. Met with religious leaders, advocacy groups, community support organizations, met with people boots on the ground. This investigation was pretty exhaustive. In addition to these interviews, we reviewed hundreds of thousands of pages of documents, including all relevant policies and training materials used by the department since 2010, BPD's database of internal affairs files from January 2010 through March 2016, BPD's data on pedestrian stops, vehicle stops, and arrests from January 2010 to May 2015, incident reports describing stops, searches, arrests, and officers' use of non-deadly force from 2010 to 2015, all files on deadly force incidents since 2010 that BPD was able to produce to us through May 1st through 2016, and investigative files on sexual assault cases from 2013 to 2015. So they didn't even get a full 5 years of that. I got 2. Keep that in mind. We were assisted by a dozen current and former law enforcement leaders and experts with experience on the issues we investigated, and we retained statistical experts to analyze BPD's data on its enforcement activities. Talk about how there's 2 Baltimores, rich white Baltimore and the poor black Baltimore, which is anyone who's lived in the city for longer than 6 fucking months can tell you. There's a black butterfly and the white L. There's going to be a map of that I can show you guys in a minute. What up, some dumb? No, this isn't specifically about the Gun Trace Task Force, and that's what's interesting about this, is that the Gun Trace Task Force shit happened after this. That's how fucked up Baltimore Police Department is. If you're talking about we own the city, yeah, it's about Gun Trace Task Force, and coincidentally, just really quick before I keep reading this so you understand how fucked up it is in this backstory. The reason why this report came out in 2016 because in 2015, Freddie Gray was killed in police custody, and then there was civil unrest throughout the city in the aftermath of his death. One of the GTTF officers, if I'm not mistaken, it might have actually been Sergeant Wayne Jenkins himself, but one of the officers was caught on CCTV looting a CVS. After the windows of the CVS have been busted out, he walks into the CVS, gets himself a trash bag full of Percocets, Oxycontin, promethazine, codeine, all the street stuff that you could get and sell in a hefty bag, slung over his shoulder, and then walk the fuck out with it, right? Not uniformed or anything like that, but like in plain clothes, no mask, no nothing. It's just him doing this shit, right? And they didn't find out. This became part of the investigation that they did into those guys months to years later. But yeah, the gun trace task force shit happened after this. That's how fucked up the Baltimore Police Department is. Talks about in the late 90s. I talked when I briefly covered this a little bit on Monday about Kurt Schmoke and the mayor in the city. And in the 90s, they had to crack down a zero tolerance policy on crime and gun violence. There was a mandatory minimum for gun possession. And I don't want to beat the horse into the ground, but this is something that a lot of the gun control advocates need to keep in mind, is that when you make things illegal, you make niggas into prisoners, right? When you have stuff like mandatory minimums for gun charges, what will happen is, as with people like Steve Angelini, so on and so forth, the police will do whatever the fuck they want anyway. So what's going to happen is, all the stuff that you want off the streets, high capacity magazines, AR-15s, whatever, when the police encounter that shit, they will just lock the niggas up who have that shit, get them into the prison industrial complex, and then the police will turn right the fuck around and sell that shit to someone else on the street that they can either lock up themselves later, or will help them protect whatever criminal organization that they have going on within their police department. How do I know this? Is this just an assumption? Is this a cynical divination? No, the police literally already fucking do this with something that's already illegal: drugs. In some cases, they already do this with guns. As stated, here in Baltimore, Steve Angelini was selling these bikers ghost guns. Ghost guns have been banned in the state of Maryland for I don't fucking know how long, right? But it doesn't fucking matter when you're the one enforcing those laws. Gun laws in Florida straight up don't get enforced against white folks. Yeah, I mean, it's the same everywhere. So, that's kind of the backstory on the BPD. The Baltimore is one of the most, if not the most heavily segregated city in the country. The first segregation laws on the books in the history of the country were in Baltimore. Baltimore, in terms of the B&O Railroad, was kind of the birthplace of what the average person would call the black middle class, right? Even though we know there's no such thing as a middle class. It was just something that elevated the black workers' standard of living dramatically. Baltimore itself is the epicenter of a lot of American fuckery. And knowing that, it gives you the understanding of what the police here were set up to do, first and foremost, knowing that Maryland was a slave state. But also, it gives you insight into why they operate the way that they do now, in terms of the poverty that's stricken the populace and how police enforce that poverty. We'll get to that, because that map is in here. I've seen it. I saw it the first time I read this, and we looked at it a little bit on Monday. But let's read some of this bullet point stuff here on the unconstitutional stops, searches, and arrests. BPD's legacy of zero-tolerance enforcement continues to drive its policing in certain Baltimore neighborhoods and leads to unconstitutional stops, searches, and arrests. Many BPD supervisors instruct officers to make frequent stops and arrests, even for minor offenses and with minimal or no suspicion, without sufficient consideration of whether this enforcement strategy promotes public safety and community trust or conforms to constitutional standards. These instructions, coupled with minimal supervision and accountability for misconduct, lead to constitutional violations. And so, before we do that, let me see if I can show you guys a quick video that's relevant about Baltimore Police Department, which I probably should have showed you guys at the very beginning, but now is not necessarily a terrible time to show you guys this. If YouTube would fucking load. I don't know how many of you guys have heard the name Michael A. Wood Jr. But in the aftermath of Freddie Gray, around the time that this report came out, he became not famous, but was doing lots of interviews as a former Baltimore Police Department officer. I'm only just now realizing that he also went on the Jesse Lee Peterson show. I'm sure that's absolutely fucking insane, but we're not going to look at that right now. We're going to look at this.
This is Mike Wood. He joined the Baltimore Police Department in 2003 when he was 24, but retired last year with a shoulder injury, disillusioned and feeling as if he was hurting the people of Baltimore more than helping them. He's a friendly, outgoing, and charismatic guy. I shouldn't have been surprised, since over the past month, he's gotten a lot of practice at being camera ready. After going on a Twitter rant in which he revealed a series of awful things that he saw his fellow officers do while on the job, he has become the go-to dissident in the law enforcement community for journalists everywhere.
So I'm gonna pause on each one of these so you can see them, because this is stuff. These were tweets that Michael A. Wood Jr. made about shit that he saw and participated in while he was in the Baltimore Police Department. So let's just go. A series of awful things that he saw his fellow officers do while. First tweet. So here we go. I'm going to start tweeting the things I've seen and participated in policing that is corrupt, intentional or not. On the job, he has become a detective slapping a completely innocent female in the face for bumping into him coming out of a corner chicken store. The go-to dissident in the law enforcement community for journalists everywhere. Punting a handcuffed, face-down suspect in the face after a foot chase. My handcuffs, not my boot or suspect. An informed critic with an inside view of a culture that has come under targeting 16 to 24-year-old black males essentially because we arrest them more, perpetrating the circle of arresting them more. So just like the report was saying, and how commissioners and so on and so forth tell you to go out there and arrest people, they tell you to target specific people to arrest because those are the people you arrest. It's circular logic. And also, fun fact, because I have it right here. As of 2019, 72% of the inmates in Maryland prisons are black, despite black citizens making up only 29.4% of the state population. This is more than double the already disproportional national average of 31%. As of 2019, the rates of incarceration for young black males are higher than any other state in the country. 27% of Maryland prisoners call Baltimore their home, despite Baltimore City making up 10.2% of Maryland's total population. So understand that in context with that. Unprecedented scrutiny over the past year. For all the talking Mike has done since going public with his stories, I didn't feel like I had a clear understanding of what being a police officer in Baltimore was actually like for him, what the job had demanded, and how the culture of the Thin Blue Line had affected his thinking about the role of cops in the lives of Baltimore's least fortunate, most vulnerable residents. With a notebook full of questions, I headed down there and asked Mike to give me a tour of his old stomping grounds.
You just ran a red light.
Yeah, that happens. There's nobody here.
We drove through his different posts, starting with the Baltimore Police Academy, the place where new recruits go to train before they're sent out into.
I used to pass this building on the way to band practice every day, every weekend when I was in high school. But also, yeah, that's totally a thing. If there's no cameras and no one around, yeah, fuck yeah, blast through them red lights. Small city. Streets are small.
The street.
You guys can see what it is. It's a refurbished
school.
Abandoned school. It's disgusting on the inside. Like, that's one thing that gets lost a lot, is how the officers are actually treated in Baltimore, and they are not treated good. Like,
They're not.
the Eastern District where I was would have literally sinks hanging off the wall.
He told me story after story that would leave anyone dumbfounded and angry.
The officer comes around the corner and just boots him in the face as hard as he can. He just turns and just smacks her, like, open God out, and threw the guy off the bike, picked up the guy's shoes, threw the guy's shoes onto the roof.
I had heard about some of this stuff already from Mike's Twitter feed. What I really wanted to understand was why it happened. How does this culture of contempt and violence towards black people take hold in a police department like Baltimore's? And how is it perpetuated, even after an entire year of police scandals being in the headlines?
For a while, when you're infiltrating, you're still technically a trainee. You could have been fired at any moment. For the first year, you can get fired for anything. You're just in pencil. It was during that time period where, like, even if I would have spoken out, somebody could have just been like, well, you're fired, see you later. You can't, like, when you're in that probationary stage, you can't upset the apple cart at all. You're going to be gone if you do.
Could you just describe sort of what you learned about police culture during those early days?
Yeah, you don't learn about it. You hear the past stories, and you see when a cop does something wrong, you see the unions and you see the politicians stand up for the officer. You don't see anyone stand up for the citizen. They just become a statistic, a number that you're going after.
That us versus them attitude, I mean, I understand how it is reinforced by, the rhetoric that comes out of police unions, for example. How does it manifest itself in interactions that police have with people, like, on a daily basis?
Right, so that's even a misnomer in itself, that you walk the beat and talk to citizens.
Okay.
So no one does that. I would try to be friendly with people, but really the reality is if I spent an hour talking to a citizen, that was an hour that everyone viewed I should have been out getting statistics.
Yep.
And what were those statistics that you should have been hitting?
So normally it's drugs, and that's your main focus, is drugs or Part 1 crimes, which would generally be felonies that have significant jail time. And guns, which is a misdemeanor, but that's a big thing here. So that's everything. Like there is no walking and talking to the community. That's what you do in policing. You're trying to do what keeps you out of trouble from all of the problems that are internal. Like, I never feared the streets, but I constantly feared other officers.
How has the climate sort of in the city shifted since Freddie Gray was killed and the riots happened? I mean, these people that we just passed, like, do they live in fear of police? They live across the street from where Freddie Gray was killed.
Right, so what they fear is that we can get away with whatever we choose to get away with. The laws are to the point where anybody can be locked up pretty much for any time. Like one of the cases I did in the Senate in Maryland.
Yo, Frackle, if you're still in here, you might want to listen to this. This is crucial.
I did in the Senate in Maryland that I testified to was how you can't actually drive a car legally. I mean, it would be impossible. No one can get this car from here to the end of the street completely legally.
So an officer can arrest you at any moment?
At any point in time. So you're constantly ready to be a problem.
Do you want to go back to the story you were telling before? So you were called on the radio for backup.
I hear the call, and I'm not too far away from where we are right now. I'm in a position to head off the guy that's running. I get out of my car, get into a nice place, and corner the guy in an alley. He turns and sees me. We have a little bit of struggle. We get on the ground. He gets the handcuffs on, and all in all, this is just like a passively resisting arrest. No cop should ever be upset when a suspect passively resists being taken to jail. That's what you should expect. And I got him down with the handcuffs, and the officer turned the corner to the alley and just kicked him in the face as hard as he could, it seemed to be, because his face swelled up instantly. He had a nice black eye. It was a contusion.
Why does he do that? What is the kick for?
All right, so I'm guessing, but my guess is that he's pissed off that he lost the foot chase. I mean, would I be pissed off if I lost the foot chase? Yeah, I've lost foot chases. It pisses you off.
So, I mean, everyone gets angry in their jobs, right?
Yeah, can you imagine if the cashier got mad that She rung up the thing wrong and decided to punch the customer in the face.
The key thing to understand, Mike told me, is that in many cases, the officers who treat people like that are doing so because they're afraid.
I have always thought that those are the ones that actually cross the line more. It's the ones that are afraid. And that's our standard in policing, is fear. So if you're afraid, you can do whatever you want. That's the legal standard.
Oh.
So if I am afraid that you can take my life, then I'm allowed to take yours legally.
Where does the fear come from then? Like in the guys that do have the fear, it sounds like you
They're
think
on
that
83
a lot of
and they're
them-
driving on
most of them do.
I-83.
The pussies. I'm not afraid to say it. They were the people that were afraid before they came in, and just because you got a badge and a gun doesn't suddenly mean you're not afraid.
I don't think most people think of police officers as being afraid, as being primarily afraid.
Definitely afraid. There's cops that won't get out of their car when there's a fight with a guy and another officer.
To some extent, they're taught to be afraid, right? That we were,
Yeah.
they've shown videos in which guys who hesitate, a second too long are
That's
blown away
great,
by some madman in the street.
They're actually not far from Waverly.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. I mean, that is actually what they show you. They show you the videos. There's an infamous one of a cop who is getting shot at and actually just seems afraid to pull the trigger at another human being. Like the guy was so empathetic that he couldn't, even though he was going to lose his life, he couldn't bring himself to kill another human being. And that's a video they show all the time.
Fear, Mike said, has a nasty tendency to turn into a kind of constant low-level anger.
What feels sort of within the bounds of acceptable behavior in Baltimore, at least during the time when you were on the job, to do with your anger?
Yeah, I mean, they don't have much of a release. So I think a lot of it gets built up in bitterness of the people and of the environment, not in a productive way. Like, they generally don't go and work out, they don't deflate themselves. Instead, they'll get angry at the citizens, give further into that us versus them, and start their infamous drinking problems that you hear about with police. That's real because it is a stressful thing.
So officers are ambiently angry and afraid for their lives at every turn. And the people they're supposed to be serving are afraid and defensive about the possibility of being hassled by a surly cop and carted off to jail for no reason. What Mike is describing is a vicious cycle, and while he's not the first guy in the world to characterize it as such, I wondered if he had any thoughts on how it might be broken.
If we actually did a community policing model designed to have decentralized power so that the patrol officer can take care of things in his or her responsibility area. So in a true community policing model, if I came down here and I see this overgrown brush, I have the power and the resources to get city workers or something like that down here to fix that. I should have the ability to get weed whackers and recruit people in the neighborhood, and maybe for that day of work, instead of locking people up, I came out with the neighborhood and did this. Because
Y'all heard that, right? Y'all heard that. Y'all heard what community policing is. Let's run that one back.
I came out with the neighborhood and did this, because that would have some kind of improvement overall.
Driving through the utterly dilapidated Sandtown neighborhood, looking at the memorial that has been erected in honor of Freddie Gray, it strikes me that clearing out an overgrown bush feels like pretty small potatoes. Plus, while community policing seems like an obviously good idea in principle, it's my sense that it usually ends up being little more than a buzzword in practice, that police culture inevitably overwhelms it.
Well, that's the thing, though. I mean, I think culture, is the transmission of values, from one person to another. I don't know if it goes laterally or if it goes from, from the top down in terms of rank. You do as your commander or your captain says, and you think the way he thinks. But it has to, I don't know. That's what I'm asking. Is there a path along which change can kind of travel?
What we have to do is we have to start thinking about what are we actually doing and what are our goals. So if our goals are to reduce violent crime, we have to change our metrics. So right now our metric is arrest. That's what judges and officers. So who's in charge of these metrics? It's command and it's politicians. So we have to change the metric to crime reduction, to justice, to problem solving. So that would be a continual metric where you would always have something to do, where you would always improve the community, because you should be focused on improving your post, not on locking up many of those people up on your post. Because if you're taking their freedom away, how are you not going to be their enemy?
To close out our tour, Mike took me to a part of Baltimore that was very different from everything we'd seen so far. A white neighborhood on the north side of town.
Roland Park.
It's where he was transferred after about 4 years on the force. He found the contrast astonishing. He also found it difficult to make his numbers because all...
This is a spot called Roland Park. I know where this is. It's part of the White L. It's a rich, white, affluent area of Baltimore where, it's up north.
of a sudden, he didn't have anyone to arrest.
Not far from where I am now.
Drive 2 blocks away into a part of town where he could easily find young black men.
So who would you arrest here? For what? It seems like you need a reason. You were saying earlier that
But
it's
you
arbitrary.
don't. That's the thing you're not understanding. So like they were in the street.
That's
That's
it?
enough.
That's enough?
Yeah, it's jaywalking. Okay, so if they throw a cigarette on the ground, you can do it. And people do those petty arrests. You'll see them. So Freddie Gray being arrested for a spring-loaded pocket knife, you can't tell me that black people carry spring-assisted pocket knives at a greater ratio than white people do. That's or even Hispanics because they're doing the construction sites around here. That's a ridiculous thing to say. Of course we all have I have a spring-assisted pocket knife. But conveniently, legally, there's an exception for police, imagine that. So
Right, of course.
when you go and you look at the arrest records, what are
Illegal for thee, not for me.
you going to see? But the people here are carrying spring-assisted pocket knives at the same ratio as the people up there. So we're not focused on the crime of the spring-assisted pocket knife. We're focused on the crime of being black and poor.
Listening to Mike talk, I found it depressingly easy to understand why distrust and hostility flow so freely between the police and the city and the communities they're supposed to be protecting. That us versus them mentality that Mike was talking about earlier, it gets reinforced and sharpened systematically, almost by design, and it poisons every interaction that cops in Baltimore have with the city's residents. Until the police figure out what the people who live here actually need from them, what it would take for officers to start improving people's lives instead of making them harder, sadder, less free, the anger and the fear that Mike Wood saw on the job are just going to persist.
We're setting the stage and then going, oh my gosh, look at this stage. Well, yeah, we created it.
So that was that. That was Michael A. Wood Jr., who was a former Baltimore City Police Department officer, dropping the gems. So let's talk about the stops, as he was just talking about. BPD officers recorded over 300,000 pedestrian stops from January 2010 through May 2015. So about a year and some change. And the true number of BPD stops during this period is likely far higher due to underreporting. So like I said, like Frackle noted, this is a tip of the iceberg type of thing. These stops are concentrated in predominantly African-American neighborhoods and often lack reasonable suspicion. Michael A. Wood just explained that. BPD's pedestrian stops are concentrated on a small portion of Baltimore residents. BPD made roughly 44% of its stops in 2 small, predominantly African-American districts that contain only 11% of the city's population. Consequently, hundreds of individuals, nearly all of them African-American, were stopped on at least 10 separate occasions from 2010 to 2015. Indeed, 7 African-American men were stopped more than 30 times during this period. BPD stops often lack reasonable suspicion. Our review of incident reports and interviews with officers and community members found that officers regularly approach individuals standing or walking on city sidewalks to detain and question them and check for outstanding warrants, despite lacking reasonable suspicion to do so. Only 3.7% of pedestrian stops resulted in officers issuing a citation or making an arrest. And as noted below, many of those arrested based upon pedestrian stops had their charges dismissed upon initial review by either supervisors at the BPD's central booking or local prosecutors. So it's people that got arrested Oh, excuse me. So first of all, it's people that they stopped. Only 3.7% of the people that they actually fucking stopped even got arrested. And even when they got arrested, a lot of them would have their fucking charges thrown out either at central booking or by the prosecutor, right? The SA is like, what the fuck are you doing? Tosses that shit right out, right? During stops, so this is about searches now. During stops, BPD officers frequently pat down or frisk individuals as a matter of course, without identifying necessary grounds to believe that the person is armed and dangerous. And even where an initial frisk is justified, we found that officers often violate the Constitution by exceeding the frisk's permissible scope. We likewise found many instances in which officers strip search individuals without legal justification. In some cases, officers performed degrading strip searches in public prior to making an arrest and without grounds to believe the searched individuals were concealing contraband on their bodies. Right? So they're strip searching people in public without even arresting them. Right? And of course, that goes hand in hand with doing shit like running through people's phones. You know what I mean? All that kind of stuff. Police, they were doing it all. Trigger warning, of course. I know I said that at the top of the video. I'm going to keep saying it because we get into deep water pretty quick here. So we're talking about arrests. We identified two categories of common unconstitutional arrests by BPD officers. One, officers make warrantless arrests without probable cause. And two, officers make arrests for misdemeanor offenses, such as loitering and trespassing, without providing the constitutionally required notice that the arrested person was engaged in unlawful activity. So they don't even give you the warning like, hey, you're doing this, stop or I'll arrest you. They're just like, you're going to jail because you were doing this, right? Arrests without probable cause. From 2010 to 2015, supervisors at Baltimore's central booking and local prosecutors rejected over 11,000 charges made by BPD officers because they lacked probable cause or otherwise did not merit prosecution. Our review of incident reports describing warrantless arrests likewise found many examples of officers making unjustified arrests. In addition, officers extend stops without justification to search for evidence that would justify an arrest. These detentions, many of which last more than an hour, constitute unconstitutional arrests. So also keep in mind that a lot of people in Maryland, like county people and white people out and, you know, people who are not from Baltimore basically talk constantly about null prosequi and stuff and about how people like Marilyn Mosby are lax on crime and they don't want to charge people. It's because of how much of the charges and arresting that they were doing was bullshit. And people's perceptions of the city of Baltimore are crafted by that. And of course, shit like The Wire and so on and so forth. And, you know, it becomes very mask off to me when I understand just how much of the stops and searches and arrests that police make here are bullshit. And the people out in the county, the white people, want them to do more of that. They want them to do more of that so that they can gentrify all of the city and not just the middle. Misdemeanor arrests without notice. BPD officers arrest individuals standing lawfully on public sidewalks for loitering, trespassing, or other misdemeanor offenses without providing adequate notice that the individuals were engaged in unlawful activity. Indeed, officers frequently invert the constitutional notice requirement. While the Constitution requires individuals to receive pre-arrest notice of the specific conduct prohibited as loitering or trespassing, BPD officers approach individuals standing lawfully on sidewalks in front of public housing complexes or private businesses and arrest them unless the individuals are able to justify their presence to the officer's satisfaction. So that also gets into unlawful searches, right? Because how you would justify your presence is showing them an ID or something that proves you live where they're about to arrest you for loitering, right? Trigger warning for a prejudice against black people, because we're about to get into that. I have to sneeze, but it's not coming out. Hang on. god. Oh my god. I'm so fucking mad. Okay. All right. Let's keep it going. Anyway. Remember what I read about the rate of incarceration in Maryland being the highest for black male youth in the entire country. BPD's targeted policing of certain Baltimore neighborhoods with minimal oversight or accountability disproportionately harms African American residents. Racially disparate impact is present at every stage of BPD's enforcement actions, from the initial decision to stop individuals on Baltimore streets to searches, arrests, and uses of force. These racial disparities, along with evidence suggesting intentional discrimination, erode the community trust that is critical to effective policing. And just because I thought about this, and I know this question is going to come up, yes, there are black police officers who do this shit, because as I've said a million fucking times in how I've dealt with people like Stardust and Rhizome, right? You don't need to be white to engage in white supremacy, right? It's not just being on the inside of the fence. It's about protecting the fence from people trying to climb it, right? Or making excursions outside the fence to bring resources from outside the fence back inside the fence, right? Kind of hate how my chat is going nuts like this, but it's okay. So let's read this. BPD disproportionately stops African American pedestrians. Citywide, BPD stopped African American residents 3 times as often as white residents after controlling for the population of the area in which the stops occurred. In each of BPD's 9 police districts, African Americans accounted for a greater share of BPD stops than the population living in the district. Of course. And BPD is far more likely to subject individual African Americans to multiple stops in short periods of time. In the 5.5 years of data we examined, African Americans accounted for 95% of the 410 individuals BPD stopped at least 10 times. One African American man in his mid-50s was stopped 30 times in less than 4 years. Despite these repeated intrusions, none of the 30 stops resulted in a citation or criminal charge. They stopped this man's 30 times in less than 4 years and didn't charge him with a single thing, just hassled him every time. I can blow the text up too. Not a big deal. There's a really insidious component to policing that factors into all this. In addition to the subjugation aspect, mass incarceration is also economically incentivized by capitalism. That is true. It's viewed as job creation. There are huge multi-billion-dollar industries built up around providing services to the prison complex. Not even talking about private prisons or prison labor, just straight up shit like commissary services and communications and surveillance and things like that. It's just yet another way capitalists profit off of human misery. My podcast co-host and my housemate, the dude that owns the house, he's from Hagerstown. Hagerstown is where one of the biggest prisons in the state is. And they're also the capitalist hub, the economic hub of that town. If you have a job in that town, it's probably at the prison. Whether you're a CO or a cook or do transportation or whatever. Your job in that town is probably somehow related to the prison there. They're the main labor provider in that area, I guess I should say. Or the main, not labor provider, because labor comes from the masses, but the main job provider. Most of the labor that's done in that town is done through the prison system. So here's where we get into fun stuff. Talking about drivers and vehicle stops. Because this is where shit gets a little fucking nutty, right? And by a little nutty, I mean, holy fuck, this is so egregiously racist. How does anyone not be aware of doing this while they're doing it? So, BPD also stops African American drivers at disproportionate rates. African Americans accounted for 82% of all BPD vehicle stops, compared to only 60% of the driving age population in the city and 27% of the driving age population in the greater metropolitan area. BPD disproportionately searches African Americans during stops. BPD searched African Americans more frequently during pedestrian and vehicle stops, even though searches of African Americans were less likely to discover contraband. Indeed, BPD officers found contraband twice as often when searching white individuals compared to African Americans during vehicle stops, and 50% more often during pedestrian stops. African Americans similarly accounted for 86% of all criminal offenses charged by BPD officers, despite making up only 63% of Baltimore residents. So it's like, I know we say this all the time, but it's like, is it that black people are more prone to criminality because of poverty? Or are we more prone to be seen as criminals as a consequence of poverty, right? Racial disparities in BPD's arrests are most pronounced for highly discretionary offenses. African Americans accounted for 91% of the 1,800 people charged solely with failure to obey or trespassing. 89% of the 1,350 charges for making a false statement to an officer, and 84% of the 6,500 people arrested for disorderly conduct. Moreover, booking officials and prosecutors declined charges brought against African Americans at significantly higher rates than charges against people of other races, indicating that officers' standards for making arrests differ by the race of the person arrested. We also found large racial disparities in BPD's arrests for drug possession. While survey data shows that African Americans use drugs at rates similar to or slightly exceeding other population groups, BPD arrested African Americans for drug possession at 5 times the rate of others. Drop the support link in chat. I absolutely can. All right. BPD deployed a policing strategy that, by its design, led to differential enforcement in African American communities. But BPD failed to use adequate policy, training, and accountability mechanisms to prevent discrimination, despite long-standing notice of concerns about how it polices African American communities in the city. BPD has conducted virtually no analysis of its own data to ensure that its enforcement strategies or activities are non-discriminatory, and the department misclassifies or otherwise fails to investigate specific complaints of racial bias. Nor has the department held officers accountable for using racial slurs or making other statements exhibiting racial bias. In some cases, BPD supervisors have ordered officers to specifically target African Americans for stops and arrests. Wow. These failures contribute to the large racial disparities in BPD's enforcement that undermine the community's trust in the fairness of the police. BPD leadership has acknowledged that this lack of trust inhibits their ability to forge important community partnerships. So, trigger warning, we're going to talk about the use of force by BPD. This is that part. And this is all still the we'll say semi-legal stuff, right? This is all still just the stuff that they're saying police just kind of went too far with, or that they're missing the mark with, right? We haven't even gotten to the straight up criminal activity that BPD is engaged in. We haven't even gotten to people being sexually assaulted after they've been arrested, that kind of thing, right? This is a worse version of what your city just admitted to. Sheesh. I'm not sure I'm sure it's another tip of the iceberg type thing with your city, JJ. Just knowing how police operate around the country and what they were designed to do from inception. But our review of investigative files for all deadly force cases from 2010 until May 1st, 2016, and a random sample of over 800 non-deadly force cases reveals that BPD engages in a pattern or practice of excessive force. Deficiencies in BPD's policies, training, and oversight of officers' force incidents have led to the pattern or practice of excessive force that we observed. We identified several recurring issues with BPD's use of force. First, BPD uses overly aggressive tactics that unnecessarily escalate encounters, increase tensions, and lead to unnecessary force, and fails to de-escalate encounters when it would be reasonable to do so. Officers frequently resort to physical force when the subject does not immediately respond to verbal commands, even where the subject poses no imminent threat to the officer or others. These tactics result from BPD's training and guidance. Second, BPD uses excessive force against individuals with mental health disabilities or in crisis. Due to a lack of training and improper tactics, BPD officers end up in unnecessarily violent confrontations with these vulnerable individuals. BPD provides less effective services to people with mental illness and intellectual disabilities by failing to account for these disabilities in officers' law enforcement actions, leading to unnecessary and excessive force being used against them. BPD has failed to make reasonable modifications in its policies, practices, and procedures to avoid discriminating against people with mental illness and intellectual disabilities. Third, BPD uses unreasonable force against juveniles. These incidents arise from BPD's failure to use widely accepted tactics for communicating and interacting with youth. Instead, officers interacting with youth rely on the same aggressive tactics they use with adults, leading to unnecessary conflict. Fourth, BPD uses unreasonable force against people who present little or no threat to officers or others. Specifically, BPD uses excessive force against 1. Individuals who are already restrained and under officers' control, and 2. Individuals who are fleeing from officers and are not suspected of serious criminal offenses. Force used on restrained individuals. We found many examples of BPD officers using unreasonable force on individuals who are restrained and no longer pose a threat to officers or the public. Force used on fleeing suspects. BPD officers frequently engage in foot pursuits of individuals, even where the fleeing individuals are not suspected of violent crimes. BPD's foot pursuit tactics endanger officers and the community and frequently led to officers using excessive force on fleeing suspects who pose minimal threat. BPD's aggressive approach to foot pursuits extends to flight in vehicles. Of course. We also examined BPD's transportation of detainees, but were unable to make a finding due to a lack of available data. And I can tell you, it's not great. They couldn't get reliable records from the BPD or jails regarding injuries sustained during transport because, of course, why would they keep track of that? Nonetheless, they found evidence that BPD routinely fails to properly secure arrestees and transport vehicles, which is absolutely true. Just an anecdote for me. The first time I got arrested by BCPD, the officer had me handcuffed in the back seat with no seatbelt on while he was fucking around playing solitaire and stuff, driving through traffic, blasting through red lights. You know what I mean? He didn't give a fuck. 2, needs to continue to update its transport equipment to protect arrestees during transport. 3, fails to keep necessary records. Oh, of course. Holy shit. And 4, must implement more robust auditing and monitoring systems to ensure that its transport policies and training are followed. Our concerns about BPD's use of excessive force are compounded by BPD's ineffective oversight of its use of force. Of the 2,818 force incidents that BPD recorded in the nearly 6-year period we reviewed, BPD investigated only 10 10 incidents based on concerns identified through its internal review. Of these 10, BPD found only one use of force to be excessive. They only reviewed 10 out of 2,818 and only found one of those uses of force to be excessive out of all of them. BPD violates the First Amendment by retaliating against individuals engaged in constitutionally protected activities. A lot of you witnessed that. Shout out to Algal, my pal. One of the first super political things that I did as far as my platform here on Twitch was to go out into the George Floyd and Breonna Taylor protests that were happening in 2020. And I got footage of riot officers hitting unarmed protesters that were on their knees with their hands up, saying, "Hands up, don't shoot." I'm assuming just because they were mad that they had to be out there doing that. So they were showing force and retaliating against people who were breaking the curfew. It's civil disobedience, so they were breaking the law in terms of breaking the curfew. But no one was looting, no one was stealing. There weren't any noise ordinances being fucked up or anything like that. Like, they literally just charge everyone with loitering, I guess. I don't fucking know. But as we heard from Michael Wood Jr. and saw earlier in this police report, they don't actually need a reason to snatch you up and arrest you. And they didn't even go that far during the protests. They would just black bag people in unmarked vehicles, throw them in the back of cars and stuff, and then give them a nice tour of the city of Baltimore. You know what I mean? Officers frequently detain and arrest members of the public for engaging in speech the officers perceive to be critical or disrespectful. If you tell a cop "fuck you" to his face, he might arrest you. That's just how it is. And BPD officers use force against members of the public who are engaging in protected speech. If you tell a police officer "fuck you," he might not just arrest you, he might fuck you up and then arrest you. And that's just how it is. BPD has failed to provide officers with sufficient guidance and oversight regarding their interactions with individuals that implicate First Amendment protections, leading to the violations we observed. So just like Michael Edwards said, it's a bunch of pussies that don't know how to handle being told "fuck you" to their face. So they got to pull the baton out or whatever and flex their nuts because they don't have any. Indications of gender bias and sexual assault investigations. Trigger fucking warning, because we're about to get into some deep water. Although we do not at this time find reasonable cause to believe that BPD engages in gender bias policing in violation of federal law, that's in violation of federal law. Obviously, they're locking niggas up. They're locking black male youth up. That's who they're locking up. So they're not discriminating against women. So it's not in violation of federal law. Insane, right? The allegations we received during the investigation, along with our review of BPD files, suggest that gender bias may be affecting BPD's handling of sexual assault cases. We found indications that officers fail to meaningfully investigate reports of sexual assault, particularly for assaults involving women with additional vulnerabilities, such as those who are involved in the sex trade. Detectives fail to develop and resolve preliminary investigations, fail to identify and collect evidence to corroborate victims' accounts, inadequately document their investigative steps, fail to collect and assess data, and report and classify reports of sexual assault, and lack supervisory review. We also have concerns that officers' interactions with women victims of sexual assault and with transgender individuals display unlawful gender bias. So this is before we even get to the shit that the police officers themselves were doing. This is just saying here, police don't give a fuck about you if you get raped, fam. If you get raped in in Baltimore City and you go to BPD, you're much better off just going full fucking I spit on your grave, fam. You're better off going full deliverance because the police ain't gonna do shit. They're not even gonna fake looking like they're doing shit. They don't give a fuck here. If you get sexually assaulted, they don't give a fuck. BPD's systemic constitutional and statutory violations are rooted in structural failures. BPD fails to use adequate policies, training, supervision, data collection, analysis, and accountability systems, has not engaged adequately with the community it polices, and does not provide its officers with the tools needed to police effectively. So this is more fucking propaganda about how the BPD fails to be good, not because police are shit, but because they aren't doing a good enough job. They're heartened by support for police reform throughout BPD, the city, and this is more propaganda because what you'll hear in Baltimore is abolish, not reform. We're on that abolition tip here in Baltimore. And sure, you could find your rented fucking activists who will talk the reform talk, but niggas on the street want the cops gone. Now, people in gentry areas and stuff, they think that they need the police because they don't understand the correlation between poverty and crime. But yeah, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy where people think that they need police because I don't know. It's fucking stupid. The people who still want the police don't understand the link between poverty and crime. People who understand that crime would end if you address poverty, they want the police abolished. That we do. There's 911 for police and then 311 for the ambulance. And now I think there's another 3-letter number or 3-number phone number for the suicide hotline, I believe, as well. But yeah, we have 311 for police emergencies or whatever. So let's look at a little background on Baltimore. Baltimore is the largest city in the state of Maryland with a population of approximately 621,000. The Baltimore metropolitan area's 2.7 million residents make it the nation's 21st largest urban center. The city's population is approximately 63% African American, 30% white, and 4% Hispanic or Latino. While the city hosts a number of successful institutions and businesses, most economic measures show that large portions of Baltimore's population struggle economically, which is, obvious as fuck. If you saw any of the buildings that they were riding past in that Michael A. Wood Jr. interview. Compared to national averages, Baltimore exhibits lower incomes, with a median household income nearly 20% lower than the national average, higher poverty rates, with 24.2% of individuals living below the federal poverty level. So that's almost a quarter of the population in Baltimore living below the federal poverty level. Elevated unemployment, with a rate hovering around 7%, and average unemployment rates per month that were 50% higher than the national average from 2014 to 2015. Baltimore also scores below national averages in education. 80.9% of the population has graduated from high school, while 27% has a bachelor's degree or higher. I don't have a bachelor's degree. In most grades and subjects, the percentage of students below basic proficiency in Baltimore was twice the rate seen in Maryland as a whole. Thank you, Selassie. Yeah. These socioeconomic challenges are pronounced among Baltimore's African American population, owing in part to the city's history of government-sponsored discrimination. This is why we have conversations about reparations, right? It's not just some dickhead white people who owned slaves. It was literally a government-sponsored institution. Schools and many other public institutions in the city remained formally segregated until the 1950s, and stark residential segregation has marked the city's history. In 1910, Baltimore became the first city in America to pass an ordinance establishing block-by-block segregation, a policy that was followed by other discriminatory practices, including restrictive covenants, aggressive redlining, a contract system for housing loans, and racially targeted subprime loans. This legacy continues to impact current homeownership patterns as Baltimore remains among the most segregated cities in the country. In 2008, the city of Baltimore sued Wells Fargo under the Fair Housing Act, alleging that the company steered minority home buyers into subprime loans. To settle this litigation, Wells Fargo agreed to provide $4.5 million in lending assistance to Baltimore residents and $3 million to address issues connected to foreclosures. I don't want you guys to see the map yet. You're going to see this and it's going to be fun. Certain neighborhoods, such as all of the census tracts in South Baltimore, have been at least 90% white since the 1970s. Other areas, including all of the tracts in Cherry Hill, Sandtown, Winchester, which was the area where Freddie Gray was killed and from, and Upton/Druid Hill, have been at least 90% black for the past 5 census periods and are currently more than 95% black. So this is the map of the black population, Baltimore. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so we can see the whole thing. This is 2010. Right? Baltimore, yeah, our infrastructure is not great, but yeah, you can see here we have the black butterfly and the white L. Black butterfly, white L. I would strongly recommend reading a book called Not in My hang on. Let me pull this shit up. I'm going to just show it to you. It's called Not in My Neighborhood, How Bigotry Shaped a Great American City. It's a book about Baltimore, explains the history of redlining, block busting, white flight, segregation in the city. Very good book. Strongly recommend reading it. It talks a lot about the white L, the black butterfly, but there it is, right? The history of racial discrimination has created persistent racial disparities in economic opportunity and education. Roughly 100,000 African-American Baltimore residents live in poverty, accounting for more than three-fourths of Baltimoreans who do so. So more than three-quarters of the people who live in poverty in Baltimore are African-American. Many communities, particularly low-income communities, confront grave challenges with respect to upward mobility. Indeed, a recent Harvard University study found that Baltimore has the least upward mobility in America. Baltimore has the least upward mobility in America. In the nation's 100 largest jurisdictions, Baltimore's children faced the worst odds of escaping poverty. Consequently, the unemployment rate among African Americans is roughly double that of white individuals. In addition, white adults are 3.5 times more likely than black adults to have earned a bachelor's degree. African Americans are also significantly less likely to hold a high school diploma. Moreover, white children make up 1% or less of the student body in numerous schools that serve disproportionately low-income children, perpetuating segregation by race and class. So the fabled hood white person that can say the N-word because they grew up in that area that people like Rhizome and Sansol like to fucking talk about, Yeah, they make less than 1% of the student body in those areas. So, yeah, do with that information what you will. Because if you're asking me, it kind of just sounds like we're reaching to make excuses for why it's okay for people to say the M-word sometimes. But hey, y'all know what my viewership is and what my position is with my platform, and I'm not going to compromise any of my principles because I want to get a cool raid from a cool streamer. The impacts of segregation and economic inequality are further evident in lead poisoning patterns across Baltimore. And this is why I said fuck Mr. Geek, and it's still fuck Mr. Geek. Not just because he's a French piece of shit, but because he's an actual garbage fucking anthropomorphized pile of refuse. He is a fucking piece of shit human being for talking shit about lead poisoning in one of the worst lead poisoned cities in the fucking country. Mr. Geek, I hope you fucking choke on a baguette on Minecraft. And yeah, eat a dick. That's why Dylan Burns doesn't give a fuck about you and left you completely out of his fucking manifesto thanking people for their contributions to Hippy Dippy. There are cool French people. That's true. There's Frantz Fanon. You know what I mean? Even though he's from Martinique. I don't know if that counts, but yeah, he's not a cool French person. The coolest French people aren't French. This is like solid facts. All facts, no printer. So, Nightwolf TV, it's also interesting to me that you mentioned the fact that all of this is in the richest country known to humanity, because all of this is also adjacent to the richest county in the richest country. So, hang on. Montgomery County, the average household income in Montgomery County is among the highest in the United States. Hang on. I'm sorry, it's not the highest, but the 7th highest county. Maryland has 2 of the top 15. Excuse me. Maryland has 3 of the top 20 highest median household income counties in the entire fucking country, and also has the worst, in terms of ability to escape it, the worst odds of escaping poverty in the entire country. Maryland has 3 of the top 20 most affluent counties in the country, and also has the county with the least likely odds of escaping poverty in the country. You understand how fucking crazy that is? America. When is the 24-hour Kano cosplay stream? It's coming soon. What did he say about lead? Fucking Mr. Geek, I forget how it even happened. We were going back and forth because I got so heated after that it made me not even. He sent me some kind of fucking meme that was supposed to imply that I'm stupid. I have lead poisoning or some shit like that. And it's like, I'm not going to say what I really want to say here because it's TOS. So I'm going to just get off of it. What happened to the sub button? I terminated my affiliate contract. I'm trying to make partner, but yeah. The coolest French speaker is probably some Nigerian Zoomer we were way too out of the loop to ever find. Yeah. What's that quote? I'm far less interested in the machinations of Einstein's mind than I am the certainty that people of equal intelligence have died in cotton fields and factories across the country. But yeah. The city has nearly 3 times the national rate of lead poisoning among children. So Baltimore City has 3 times almost the national rate of lead poisoning of children in the entire fucking country. This burden weighs heaviest on poor African American communities because of course it does. The areas with the highest percentage of children with elevated blood lead levels are the heavily African American neighborhoods of Sandtown, Winchester, and Harlem Park, Midway and Coldstream, and Edmondson Village, right? You see me, I am what? African American, right? I'm a fucking streamer and I drive a forklift. Clearly I am not particularly well off when it comes to income, right? So you're going to fucking make a joke about me having lead poisoning as an insult to my intelligence? Fuck you. That's why you got fucking clapped in World War II. Suck a frog. According to the Center for Disease Control, even low levels of lead are associated with learning and behavioral problems, including decreased cognitive performance. While crime rate in urban America has declined significantly since the 1990s, Baltimore has experienced violent crime rates relatively higher than many other large cities. And it should be noted that, just like we said in the last paragraph, behavioral problems, which would include acting out in violence, that is a consequence of lead poisoning. And we know that the lead poisoning is 3 times higher here than anywhere else in the country. Old cheap homes equals lead pipes. Not just lead pipes, cream of the slop. Lead paint as well. Lead paint and asbestos. And because we have fucking slumlords here, what they'll do is just paint over they'll just paint new paint over the old lead paint. And you'll have no fucking clue. You have to actually get your shit tested. In this neighborhood that I'm in right now, I lived in another house that was maybe a block from here. We couldn't even eat food that was grown in our own fucking backyard. Why? Because the soil itself was completely contaminated. And I mean saturated with lead. Right? My roommate had to build with 2x4s and buy soil to make a whole nother bed with plastic and everything to make sure none of that shit contaminated any of the shit that he was growing for us to eat, right? This is the city we live in. These are the conditions that people expect us to pull ourselves up from our fucking bootstraps out of. These types of conditions. These are the things that people, these sock dems and liberals and shit can't even fathom, can't even conceive of. They don't even think this type of shit exists in America, I bet you. They think this shit is reserved for like third world countries and shit. When it's places like Baltimore, places like Alabama, right? That's crazy, cream of the slop. And that's also crazy, JJ. Because, yeah. Anyway, let's keep going. According to data from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, in 2014, Baltimore had the 6th highest rate of violent crimes out of the country's 76 cities with at least 250,000 inhabitants. Or residents, rather. Baltimore's violent crime rate is roughly equal to that of Cleveland. And I'm from Dayton, Ohio, and I know they fucking got busy in Cleveland in the 90s, for sure. As Bone Thugs, they sold dope in the snow out that bitch. They were official in Cleveland. Let's not get it twisted. Albeit lower than the rate of violent crime in Detroit, Memphis, and Milwaukee. My dad actually lived in Memphis for a minute too, and I've been to Detroit too. The country is just different, bro. This past year reflected a notable surge in violence. On a per capita basis, 2015 was the deadliest year in Baltimore's history, with 344 homicides. The city's overall gun violence increased more than 75% compared to the previous year, with more than 900 people shot. And keep in mind, this is in the most segregated and heavily policed city and one of the most segregated and heavily gun-controlled states in the entire country, right? So when people tell you they want more regulation on firearms, this is what that looks like. Locking niggas up for possessing firearms and extended mags and whatever else, right? And the argument is that it reduces gun violence and it reduces people killed by guns. And that's true. 100% true. You'd probably reduce gun violence also by fucking throwing ankle monitors on everybody. That would probably also reduce violence. But that's not the most important part of that, is it? Right? That's not the most crucial outcome of that event. As in other major cities, gang activity and the drug economy are also prominent features of Baltimore's crime landscape, although Baltimore residents use drugs at similar rates to the national average. Despite such challenges, Baltimore remains a vibrant cultural center in the region. Of course, we got the punk scene, we got the hip-hop scene, we got the rave scene, we got art scene, fucking FGC is out this bitch. Baltimore has literally everything. Baltimore has everything. Any possible intersection of nerd culture or deep subculture, whatever you want, we got it here for you. And we got it doper than anywhere else. Unique to Baltimore. It has a significant concentration of educational, medical, cultural, and sports institutions and a rich collection of neighborhoods. As we heard throughout our investigation, residents take great pride in their neighborhoods and their city as a whole and have invested deeply in them. These residents are supported by a vast array of community leaders, grassroots organizations, and service providers, and together they comprise a resilient and diverse collection of communities. Right? I fucking rep Remington and I rep Waverly all day. Those are the fucking spots that I fuck with in B-more. Those are the places that I lived. I fuck with Park Heights. I spent some time out there. I fuck with the Mondawmin area. Spent a lot of time at the mall. Druid Hill. Fuck with that area. But Baltimore as just an entity. And fuck even the city. You see this giant ass county flag hanging behind me. I just fuck with Baltimore. I'm just a Baltimore head. Grew up in the county. Living in the city. Working and doing everything in between and both, and just fucking just a Baltimore ass nigga. I'm gonna live and die in this bitch, for better or for worse. Like so many other people like me here, for very different reasons, right? So a lot of people, as we've seen, fucking can't get out of here because it's impossible. Lowest odds out of any other fucking city in the entire country. The Baltimore Police Department is the 8th largest municipal police department in the entire fucking country. 8th largest. One of the top 10 largest police departments in the whole country. And they complain about how they don't have enough police officers or resources or whatever. We don't really need to get into too much about them because who gives a fuck about them? Health hazards, blah, blah, blah. We already know what the police's priorities are: to protect capital. They don't give a fuck about the community. Federal involvement. This is talking about the BPD's reforms, which I don't really care about, especially if we're talking about feds, because y'all know I'm the fucking Eddie Conway super fan, right? The feds have been here whole tea with COINTELPRO. I don't give a fuck what they have to say or do here, especially when it comes to the Baltimore Police Department, right? And like I was saying with Frackle, with this whole report, this is some limited hangout type shit. This is the feds literally having no choice but to admit this shit because it's stuff that we all already know. And it's just the tip of the iceberg. It's just to and stay our thirst for blood and revenge. Let me not make any racial revenge fucking arguments here. Give Sansol some more ammo to talk about how people like me are fucking black nationalists and fascists, and I'm like Black Hitler, like Professor Flowers and shit. These insane fucking people with these ridiculous fucking takes. Yeah, police have their own memes. Police have their own meme culture. So the Violent Crime Impact Division, of course, they'll have all these different specialized task forces for, like, we have the Gun Trace Task Force, we have the Narcs for the drugs, right? And I guess this was another one of those, the Violent Crime Impact Division. Hang on. Jesus Christ. A current BPD sergeant recently endorsed this approach to policing, the zero tolerance policing, posting on Facebook that the solution to the murder rate is easy: flex cuffs and align at central booking. CJIS code 2-0055. CJIS 2-0055 is the offense code entered for loitering arrests. Oh my God. So they're not even hiding it. Similarly, a flyer celebrating loitering arrests was posted in several BPD districts. The flyer depicted 3 officers from one of BPD's specialized units known as Violent Crime Impact Division, or VCID, leading a handcuffed man wearing a hoodie along a city sidewalk towards a police transport van with the text VCID, striking fear into loiterers citywide. Wild. So it's a joke to them. They're just like, oh, you're going to jail, you're loitering. Like, I'm deciding right now you're going to jail for loitering. This shit is only going to get worse considering the current political climate. So that's the interesting thing, Cream of the Slop, is because the police department is under consent decree already. And shit is this bad as it is. This right here precipitated this, and we still have officers like Steve Angelini on the job, right? Selling drugs and cocaine, or excuse me, selling guns and cocaine to biker gangs, right? The police always exist above the law, no matter what fancy window dressing you try to fucking put on that shit. If you put lipstick on a pig, no pun intended, if you put lipstick on a fucking pig, it's still a pig. Doesn't matter how hard you French that motherfucker. No geek. So here we have Terry versus Ohio. The Terry stops, which is, if you're from New York or familiar with New York, you might understand those as stop and frisks. In New York, it was a whole thing because they were like training, I guess, police officers to do that. Whereas here in BPD, baby, what's understood doesn't need to be explained. They just do that shit. And it's not even as if they do that with the reading here. They don't do that with the expectation of discovering crimes or discovering evidence of crimes. They do it as its own form of crime deterrent. Despite the low rate of stops uncovering evidence of crimes, BPD supervisors often direct officers to make frequent stops as a crime suppression technique. Many of the unlawful stops we identified appear motivated at least in part by officers' desire to check whether the stopped individuals have outstanding warrants that would allow officers to make an arrest or search individuals in hopes of finding illegal firearms or narcotics. Right? They regularly do unlawful searches and frisks, where we talked about stop and frisk and stuff. BPD was doing that shit here. Trigger warning for groping, sexual assault. In addition to impermissible Terry frisks, they're talking about stop and frisk. Our investigation found many instances in which BPD officers strip search individuals without justification, often in public areas. So that's often in public areas, subjecting them to humiliation and violating the Constitution. Strip searches are fairly understood as degrading and under the Fourth Amendment are reasonable only in narrow circumstances. That's the statutes and shit. Strip searches are never permissible as a part of a pre-arrest weapons frisk. And this is another statute that says weapons frisk must be limited to the outer layers of a person's clothing, which is wild, but makes sense. You know what I mean? I'm probably not going to shove a Glock 19 up my ass and pull it out to shoot someone with. You know what I mean? But people do anything these days. Following a lawful arrest, the reasonableness of a strip search turns on the scope of the particular intrusion, the manner in which it is conducted, the justification for initiating it, and the place in which it is conducted. Absent specific facts indicating that an arrestee is concealing a weapon or contraband, officers may not strip search a person incident to arrest for an offense that is not commonly associated by its very nature with the possession of weapons or contraband. So if they lock you up for loitering, they can't strip search you. Period. At least that's what it's supposed to be, but we already know the police do whatever the fuck they want, right? Moreover, courts have repeatedly emphasized the necessity of conducting a strip search in private. So even when you're supposed to do strip searches, you're supposed to do them in private, whereas these motherfuckers were just doing them all over the place on the sidewalk, right? Nevertheless, our investigation found that BPD officers frequently ignore these requirements and strip search individuals prior to arrest in public view or both. Numerous Baltimore residents interviewed by the Justice Department recounted stories of the BPD officers jumping out of police vehicles and strip searching individuals on public streets. So they jump out the car and immediately strip search you. Bong. You see the officer, spread your sack. Spread your cheeks, lift your sack immediately. As soon as you see the officer. BPD has long been on notice of such allegations. In the last 5 years, BPD has faced multiple lawsuits and more than 60 complaints alleging unlawful strip searches. In one of these incidents, memorialized in a complaint that the department sustained, officers in BPD's Eastern District publicly strip searched a woman, of course, following a routine traffic stop for a missing headlight. Wow. Officers ordered the woman to exit her vehicle, remove her clothes, and stand on the sidewalk to be searched. The woman asked the male officer in charge, "I really got to take all my clothes off?" The male officer replied, "Yeah," and ordered a female officer to strip search the woman. The female officer then put on purple latex gloves, pulled up the woman's shirt, and searched around her bra. Finding no weapons or contraband around the woman's chest, the officer then pulled down the woman's underwear and searched her anal cavity. This search again found no evidence of wrongdoing, and the officers released the woman without charges. Indeed, the woman received only a repair order for her headlight. The search occurred in full view of the street, although the supervising male officer claimed he turned away and did not watch the woman disrobe, of course. Who gives a fuck? After the woman filed a complaint, BPD investigators corroborated the woman's story with testimony from several witnesses and by recovering the female officer's latex gloves from the search location. Officers conducted this highly invasive search despite lacking any indication that the woman had committed a criminal offense or possessed concealed contraband. The male officer who ordered the search received only a simple reprimand and an instruction that he could not serve as an officer in charge until he was properly trained. So, all you get for doing this kind of crazy shit is a slap on the wrist. That's it. If anything, your job is now easier, right? You don't have to do as much shit now. You can just collect your check and chill the fuck out. This is why the police are fucking disgusting, dog. An African-American teenager recounted a similar story to the Justice Department investigators that involved 2 public strip searches in the winter of 2016 by the same officer. According to the teenager, he was stopped in January 2016 while walking on a street near his home by 2 officers who were looking for the teenager's older brother, whom the officers suspected of dealing narcotics. One of the officers pushed the teenager up against a wall and frisked him. This search did not yield contraband. The officer then stripped off the teenager's jacket and sweatshirt and frisked him again in front of his teenage girlfriend. When the search likewise found no contraband, the officer ordered the teenager to give your girl your phone. I'm checking you right now. The officer then pulled down the teenager's pants and boxer shorts and strip searched him in full view of the street and his girlfriend. The officers reported the incident disputes this account, claiming that they did not conduct a strip search and instead recovered narcotics from the teenager during a consensual pat-down. So they planted drugs on him. They strip searched him and then planted drugs on him. No narcotics were ever produced to the teenager's public defender, however, and the state's attorney's office dismissed the drug charges for lack of evidence. So they didn't even go through the effort to plant the drugs on him. They just said he had drugs. They strip searched him, and then after the fact said, no, we didn't strip search him. He let us frisk him, and that's when we found drugs on him, because that's what you do when you're fucking drug trafficking. You just agree. You just consent to searches. Unbelievable. The teenager filed a lengthy complaint with BPD describing the incident and identifying multiple witnesses. The teenager recounted to us that, shortly after filing the complaint, the same officer approached him near a McDonald's restaurant in his neighborhood, pushed the teenager against the wall, pulled down his pants, and grabbed his genitals. The officer filed no charges against the teenager in the second incident, which the teenager believes was done in retaliation for filing a complaint about the first strip search. So, trigger warning, but can you fucking imagine? Do you understand how I would kill someone in Minecraft? The police are pulling you up for some shit that doesn't even fucking involve you. They strip search you in front of your girl on the street in front of everyone. And then when you file a complaint about it, the officer fucking hunts you down and smacks you against the wall at McDonald's and pulls your dick out and grabs it. This is the type of shit that the police do. What's up, Hung Master? Other complaints describe similar incidents in which BPD officers conduct public strip searches of individuals who have not been arrested. For example, in September 2014, a man filed a complaint stating that an officer in the Central District searched him several days in a row, including undoing his pants and searching his hindquarters on a public street. When the strip search did not find contraband, the officer told the man to leave the area and warned that the officer would search him again every time he returned. The man then filed a complaint with Internal Affairs and identified the officer who conducted the strip search by name. When Internal Affairs investigators pressed the man to provide a detailed description of the officer, the man recalled that the officer had red patches with sergeant stripes on his uniform. The investigator recognized the description as patches worn by the officer in charge of a shift and confirmed that the officer named by the man was working as an officer in charge in the Central District on the dates that the man alleged he was strip searched. Internal Affairs nonetheless deemed the complaint not sustained without further explanation. Wild. So, They actually confirmed that this was the dude that was playing tickle booty with everybody who came in the fucking area, trying to finger pop people's assholes just because he has a badge and he can, right? Fucking identified the police officer that was doing it and that he was there during the allegations. So he had means, motive, and he had the means and the opportunity, but they just threw the shit out just cause, right? Deficient oversight and accountability has helped perpetuate BPD's use of unlawful strip searches. Well, of course. Unconstitutional arrests without probable cause, of course. Arresting people lawfully on streets and just calling them loiterers. There's more. This is different from what I read the first time. There's more, and it's worse than this. Hang on. This is rough. I don't even know if I want to read this. I'll just read this text message. A Baltimore prosecutor called a rape survivor a conniving little whore, and a Baltimore police officer replied with, LMAO, I feel the same. Baltimore police's mistreatment of rape survivors is one of the worst of any police department in the nation. And this thing I'm reading is just referencing this study that I'm already reading, or this investigation. Lack oversight, blah, blah, blah. So BPD discriminates against African Americans in its enforcement activities. So this is, so just so you can see this graph, because this is where we're going to get into the fun stuff with the maps and stuff. This red bar is the stops per 1,000 African American residents. And this blue bar is the stops per 1,000 Caucasian residents. So almost half of all the black people get stopped, but less than a fifth of white people get stopped. So that's fun. And here's the the stops compared to the population. It's more even there, but when we were talking about the northern, the southern, and the southeast, and the central, and the northeast, remember I was telling you guys about the black butterfly and the white L earlier? Central, southern, northern, southeast, that's all part of the white L. You can look at how disproportionate those pedestrian stops are, especially in the southeast, in the really affluent area, Sparrows Point and such. Unvaccinated subhuman. You are skating on thin ice. You are banned from Maudie and Levelhead? Fam, you're lucky I don't just ban you right now. Mind your fucking P's and Q's in this bitch, because you were skating on thin ice. Understand that. Oh, and this is convenient. We got a nice little map here of the black butterfly and the white L. So you can see here, remember we looked at the map earlier? 37 channels, that's impressive. I don't know if I would call that impressive, friend. I think pathetic is the word that I would use, but So remember that map of the black butterfly and the white L I showed you guys earlier? Well, here is that overlaid with a map of pedestrian stops. And you'll notice something funny about the density of stops in these areas and this area versus this area. Very peculiar. Oh, you don't know about the unvaccinated subhuman? Crazy. The end of his dick. Yeah, suck the end of his dick. Yeah. I don't know what he was finna say. I was gonna give him a chance, but my man was banned in 37 other fucking channels. So I'm sure he's ready to send me a whisper or something, calling me a pussy or something in a minute, but fuck him. But you guys all see this, right? The colored, no pun intended, the colored areas are the areas with higher, more dense black populations. The red represents over 65% African Americans in those areas. The yellow is over 35% but less than half. And then the orange is over 50% but less than 65. I have the death sentence in 12 systems. Yeah, now it's 13. Fuck out of here. But yeah, the white areas are areas that have less than 35% black population. And those pedestrian stops, the green ones are the black ones, and the gray ones are the white ones. Might be a little hard to see. Yeah, it's fucking too grainy. But suffice it to say, it is not proportionate. So, oh my God. BPD's pedestrian and vehicle stops disproportionately impact African Americans. The large racial disparities in stops persist throughout the city, subjecting African Americans to heightened intrusion from the police in their lives. Officers also search African Americans at higher rates during these stops, even though searches of African Americans are less likely to find contraband than searches of people from other racial backgrounds. These differential search rates are not justified by characteristics of the people searched. And naturally, of course, their analysis of racial patterns in BPD searches was challenging because of the department's deficient data collection, of course. Holy fuck, dude. Look at, like... there's no excuse for this. The only way you could possibly find this acceptable is if you just don't fucking know about it, which is probably true for a lot of people on Twitch. Look at all those fucking disturbing the peace 25%, over 25% of disturbing the peace charges dismissed against black people. BPD arrests African Americans for drug possession offenses at rates far exceeding their drug usage. To assess the racial impact of BPD's drug arrests, we first aggregated all drug possession offenses, for which BPD made at least 3,000 charges from November 2010 through June 2015. Thanks for hanging out, Globus. I'm probably going to end soon. There might be a part 2 to this stream on Friday. BPD charged approximately 100,000 people for drug possession under these offenses. 89% of those charged were African American. BPD made 254 drug arrests for every 1,000 African American Baltimore residents, while making only 52 drug arrests per 1,000 residents of other races. So that's like 5 times. African Americans were thus 5 times more. Yeah, 5 times more likely than others to be arrested for drug offenses. Holy fuck, dude. And this is the other thing that is nuts. And this was a good spot to end because this blew my mind the first time I read it, and it blew my mind Monday when I looked at it too. So here we go. BPD arrests African Americans for drug possession offenses at higher rates than similar cities. A second measure of BPD's disproportionate drug enforcement is the agency's high rate of arresting African Americans for drug possession offenses compared to law enforcement agencies in cities with comparable demographic profiles, crime rates, and economic profiles. Expert criminologists retained for our investigation identified 5 cities most comparable to Baltimore for purposes of this analysis. Thanks for the tip, Freckle. Atlanta, Cleveland, Detroit, Memphis, and Milwaukee. These cities reported overall drug usage rates in line with Baltimore's 8.2%, including 9% in Milwaukee, 13.6% in Detroit, and 6.5% in Atlanta. The comparison cities likewise reported usage rates similar to Baltimore's 3.3% for drugs other than marijuana. Cleveland reported 3.5% non-marijuana usage, Atlanta 3.1%, and Detroit 3.7%. Despite these similarities in rates of drug use, however, we found that BPD makes far more drug arrests than agencies in Baltimore's peer cities. To make this comparison, we collected data from the Bureau of Justice Statistics on drug arrests in Baltimore and the 5 comparison cities. The most recent period for which BJS data is available is 2010 through 2012. We use the 2010 through 2012 BJS data for all the cities, including Baltimore, to standardize how arrests are categorized and reported. We then controlled for population differences among these cities by measuring arrest rates based on the number of drug arrests per 1,000 residents in each racial category. The results show that BPD's rate of arresting African Americans for drug crimes dramatically exceeds the rate of such arrests by agencies in the comparison cities. Indeed, for each of the 3 years we examined, Baltimore drug arrests of African Americans were between 200 and 500% higher than the comparison cities. That's nuts. Detroit had almost 13.6 fucking percent, almost coming close to double the amount of drug usage that Baltimore had. And look at that. It's nuts. Anyway, we're going to have to make this a 2-parter, I guess. We're going to go more into this on Friday. Because I want some of the interviews. I remember listening to interviews of people who had been stopped by police. One woman was a sex worker that was talking about her experience with a police officer who, content warning, who detained her and essentially was like, suck my dick or you're going to jail, right? It's a sex worker. Anyway, thanks for rocking with me tonight, y'all. I know this was kind of heavy. Might have been a little informative for y'all. Let me see who we're going to raid out to tonight. Also, I have 20-something fucking Twitter notifications, so make sure it's no niggas talking shit. Never mind. Nobody's talking shit because nobody can talk shit. Don't talk shit to me because I'm better at it than you. All right, who's live? Who is live? Let's do a raid. Merrick's live. Let's raid Merrick. Fuck it. Yeah, much love, Big Richie Lizzie. Much love to all y'all. You know I fuck with you. You know I'm gonna rock with y'all like y'all rocking with me. And I'll catch you all Friday, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're gonna go more into the DOJ's findings from 2016 about the Baltimore Police Department. And until then, stay safe, stay healthy, stay blessed, y'all. And I'll catch y'all on the flip.
You should leave. You should leave. I think, thank you, Endless. Hey. I think that you have to put your safety first. I think that, like, especially in terms of trans people, I would not recommend trans people staying in red states. That frightens me. I know that it's really hard. Oh, God, I just makeup in my eye. I know that it's really hard